This Feast of All Saints is very likely originated in Ireland. One of the earliest martyrologies in Ireland had April 17th rather, as a commemoration of all the martyrs, and then the commemoration of all the saints in Ireland, England, and in Europe. The church then, it was around the 800s when we have the Universal Feast of All Saints. Today it's a celebration of not only all of the canonized saints in the church who are in heaven, but all the saints, all those who have gained that perfection of charity and are now face to face with God in heaven. Men, women, and children from over the centuries since man was created have gone to heaven and have become saints. Saint is a person who's face to face with God, one who has loved God above all things and his neighbor as himself. We look at the saints and we're surrounded by them. The opening prayer says we are a part of this communion of saints who are all around the Eucharistic banquet table of the Lord in heaven. We are around this Eucharistic banquet table here. It's a foretaste of what heaven will be. And when we look at the lives of the saints, in the early church, they only recognized the saints as those who were martyrs. But then when the period of great martyrdom had subsided, the church finally said we need to recognize that men and women and children who live good lives every day out of love for God and neighbor can also be saints. And so it began that the people recognized the goodness in others. We have so many examples of saintly living. You know, when we're traveling, we come into this world, we're set on a journey, and our journey is toward heaven. And we have to find the way to heaven. The apostles even said to Jesus, we don't know where you're going, how can we know the way? When we travel, I know when I've traveled in this country as well as in Europe especially, I needed guidebooks and maps and everything to know where I was going to reach where I wanted to go. As Christians, we find that guidebook, that roadmap in the lives of the saints. Each saint kind of specialized in some particular aspect of Christ's life. We have St. Vincent de Paul, who was Christ in his love for the poor. We have St. Louis the King, who was Christ, who was a king and a saintly man ruling his kingdom. We have Maria Goretti, a young girl martyred rather than giving in to the sexual advances of someone. We have Pope St. John Paul II, who led the church. We have husbands and wives. We have single people, married people, old people, young people. People serve the sick, people who teach, people who do all kinds of good things in the name of the Lord. And what we do every day in our particular vocation is hopefully leading us to that sainthood we all long for. And it can be as simple as loving your spouse, loving your children, loving your grandchildren, loving your neighbors, loving your church, reaching out to people who are in need, all those things that are noticed by God. That's what the saints did. That's what they did. And when we read their lives, we're certainly inspired by them to keep heading in the same direction. They lived these Beatitudes. They realized they were poor in spirit, and yet they humbly depended upon God for all things. That's what that means. To mourn. We mourn when someone dies. And mourning is a sign of love. And it's a great gift to us in the Beatitudes. Because if we did never love, we would never mourn. Yesterday I celebrated the funeral of my Aunt Rose Garrity, Aunt Babe we all called her. She was 94 years old and a really good woman. 2 weeks ago I visited her at the hospice of Western Reserve out there, Ames Hospice. She was sitting up in the bed and she was having a very good day, and she was in hospice care. And she said, Father Jim, I'm just waiting for God to take me. She said, I can't wait to get to heaven. She said, can you imagine just how great it is to close your eyes and open them up and you see Jesus? And she said, and I can be with your Uncle Jerry and your parents and with all the ones we've loved in life. And she said, I just can't wait to get there. I shared that with the family yesterday at the funeral and thought, shouldn't we all be that way? I mean, she genuinely wanted to just go to heaven. She said, 94 years, I've been here long enough. And, and she was a woman who raised 6 children, and her first husband died, and then she married my Uncle Jerry, whose wife died, and he had 5 kids. And she just did what was in front of her. She just kept going ahead and never complained and always just did the good. A woman who I really believe is a saint, because as I told the people, she did ordinary things day in and day out extraordinarily well. And that's what brings us to sainthood. So today, and we're surrounded by all the saints. I love the stained glass windows in this church depicting all these saints. They're all looking upon us from heaven. St. Joseph and our Blessed Mother, St. Patrick, all the saints that are depicted here are with us in every Mass that we celebrate. And we are a part of that communion of saints. So here we ask the Lord to give us perseverance, long-suffering, the ability to keep on going until we can say, Lord, I'm ready. I'm ready to be taken into heaven.